Hello, Davlet. Welcome to the Builder's Mind podcast.
Hey, Jahid. Great to meet you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining. I would like to start with the AI and rise of vibe coding, vibe selling, and everything like related to vibe. Is that it seems that it became super easy to build stuff, and also there are now this third-party hosting type of like products. And 2 weeks ago or like 1 week ago, we saw what happened with Builder.ai. So my question is that, is AI making the whole technology space more secure or insecure?
Oh, great angle, great start to what we're going to discuss today. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, and vibe coding as we see today is definitely, it's not complete solution yet, right? We are still just starting to understand what it means to develop and build products using AI. Because before, everything you were built were pretty deterministic, right? And if you overlook something, that's on you because you didn't do the job. Right now, by giving more and more work to AI, there is no capacity to review each line and understand each line. And that's basically the whole point of vibe coding, that you don't need to do it. And then obviously it can do something that is not necessarily secure or correct or right. So in general, we will see right now, and we're already seeing how secrets are being shared, and in general, security is very poor for all these vibe coding apps, especially in the hands of, let's say, layman users, right, that not necessarily understand how to check for these things and how to prompt correctly for those things.
Yeah. I think like for like most of, no coder builders, I think they don't know much about what is happening behind the scene, like in terms of cloud, kind of where their code will be saved, where the information will be saved. So maybe if you can simply explain to non-technical people that, what happens behind the scenes if they are building something. So what happens in the backend, like where the data goes and all these simple steps.
Great question. And I think one of the whole problem with this becomes is that suddenly a whole set of users that not necessarily haven't gone through rigorous training process have access to the full power of coding. But with power comes this responsibility as well, right? Like if you think about no code tools pre-AI era, they would give you blocks to work with. So there's an input field, there's an interface here, you can a payment system, and then there is a ready-made plugin system. And that way, the developers of those no-code tools ensured that the end user experience will be safe and correct because they're built by professional engineers. So now we get this vibe coding, which is basically coding, right? Which has the full power and full access to everything. You can do whatever, from beautiful designs to malicious code in the same way. And people don't understand what they do, right? They don't understand the separation of concerns. They don't understand what is safe to store or not to store, not to safe to store in database or in open format. What is keys, what are private keys. So typically, to understand, let's say the landscape is you have front-end code, front-end apps that this is what users first sees on the website, right? The buttons, the visual things. And then when you interact with those, they usually do some work, do some business logic, and that is typically what is handled in backend. And this backend is the computational machines code that do things for you, and they typically connect to maybe third-party APIs like payments. They connect to database to store and retrieve the information so that user can come back and it remembers them. And then you have cloud infrastructure is where everything, all of this stored and make it accessible to the whole world. Because you build the apps, but you need to make it accessible. You can install apps on your computer and make your computer open to the world, and that will be your infrastructure. But the right way to do it today is usually either using platform as a service providers or cloud providers like Microsoft, AWS, and Google.
Yeah, and if something goes wrong, so who is responsible for the security? Is it me as a non-coder, like building, or is it actually the platforms like Lovable, Macle, or is it the end, like the foundational models, that all these people are using it?
Yeah. No, that's a tricky one, right? No one wants to take responsibility, and these companies, they push all the responsibility to the end user. Like, you create stuff, you own it, right? But I do think they should take more responsibility on ensuring that the users, because that's how they promote it, that's how they sell it, right? You don't need technical background to build apps, right? So, and that with that promise should come all the underlying infrastructure and security, I believe.
Yeah, because I think this like vibe coding tools are amazing because it gives access to so many people to build. But of course, there is this like security angle that you have to be mindful of it. And but for like as someone that you never touch the technology, this is not the first thing that comes to your mind. It's like if something happens, like to your app, then you will be okay. I need to find someone to like take care of it. But do you kind of somehow see that these existing solutions are already looking in the security part themselves, or how it's happening now actually?
Definitely, I do believe it's a growing pains, going fast and breaking things. So from that point of view, we already see, Lovable, they've been patching their way how you can share the keys. So kudos to them. But that happened after a lot of keys being shared and leaked. So it's gonna be, I would say, lagging for sure, right? When something happens, that's when people usually look at the security, and that's a sad state of situation, state of art, and that's what we're trying to solve with CloudGini, actually.
Yeah, I think like we're super early in this like journey of vibe coding and all this stuff. So I think there's a lot to innovate, but also there's a lot to learn. I think it's a best moment to kind of jump into CloudGini. If you can do a short pitch, what it is, who it is for, and what are the main values that you're pushing.
Right, and as I spoke earlier, there are 3 layers, right? Front-end, back-end, and cloud infrastructure on which everything sits, basically, and makes it available to the world. So CloudGini tackles the security concerns in exactly that layer, cloud infrastructure layer. We make security on autopilot using AI agents. Ironically enough, right? We're using AI to battle the problems maybe created by AI, but I think this is what's going to happen because you need to go fast. And our goal is to ensure that all teams, not our tool, I would say, is quite sophisticated tool. It's for engineers, but with the amount of requirements that comes their way, it becomes increasingly hard to keep on top of all the security vulnerabilities and issues that can come up. So we deploy safe and trained agents that make sure that your cloud setup is absolutely secure. And we use all kind of monitors and checks to ensure that is correct.
Yeah, and so then are you selling it to lovable type of companies or more to the end users? And for me, that like I just vibe code things.
I would say it's end users. So once you, as a product owner, will hopefully grow your product to the state where lovable is not enough, and there will be such state pretty soon. If you're hitting any kind of scale, what they offer will be quite limited to just prototyping and testing things, right? Once you have a proper production application that you can scale to millions of users, you will definitely need to your own infrastructure. You will need to take your code out of lovable and start maintaining it in a more sophisticated way. And that's where we come in, right? Where we can remove the need of platform engineer or postpone it and be that capacity still for you.
Okay, so if I can rephrase what CloudGini is, that so as a backend developer, you kind of code the backend, like all the workflow, and then CloudGini comes in and then sees if the code is written in a secured way and if there is no kind of like vulnerabilities or how.
I would say not backend side, but even more foundational layer, which is cloud outside, because there is a lot of, let's say it's also typically written in code now, infrastructure, where you define your app services, your databases, everything that needs to work, right? Not application logic, let's say, where backend usually is. The machines, the actual machines or virtual machines on which those services running. So we ensure that the networks are protected, databases are encrypted, the data is encrypted in transit, these kind of things.
Okay, perfect. Maybe it's the base to like look at kind of like the product.
Yeah, I'm happy to showcase, and it's quite technical, so we are still working on making it more accessible. But in a nutshell, once you go through the onboarding process that takes less than a couple of minutes, you will immediately end up in the dashboard that provides you with some insights. And when I'm talking about repository, I'm talking about the place where you store your infrastructure as code. It's how you define your infrastructure, how you define your configuration of your databases and app services and virtual machines. So we run several different checks on your infrastructure, the code, and immediately we prioritize them for you and make sure, hey, here is the main issues you need to focus on. And in your dashboard, and we also fix them for you. And then you can see one of those, right? The Azure Key Vault, which is the service where you keep your secrets. It's actually, we were talking about linked secrets, right? Then they couldn't be stored in open code because it's not safe. They need to be stored in a secure way, such as the Azure Key Vault in case of Azure. And no one should have access to it. So our agent identified this problem and then created a PR to ensure that this issue is fixed. And PR is pull request. It's a so-called code suggestion, so to speak. And this is how usually developers collaborate with each other by creating pull requests so that every developer in an organization can review the changes, can understand them, and approve them. So here our bot, AI agent, explained the problem and created a summary what has been changed and why that was needed to be changed based on those requirements. And it also did all the deeper analysis if engineer needs to understand operational, security, and cost implications of this change, even compliance impact. And then it ran all the tests to make sure that this change actually runs in a real environment and ready to be deployed. And typically you can also see the code infrastructure that was changed as well. So this allows engineering teams to spend less time on finding those issues, reviewing them, prioritizing them, finding documentation, how to fix them, writing code. It's already done. So now it's more about understanding the impact, reviewing that it does indeed what it was promising to do, and merging it. So that removes hours and hours of typical work of a DevOps or platform engineer.
Okay, and how accurate it is, like your agent, compared to a human engineer?
That's a great question. We still need to work, let's say, on metrics in a sense that we would be comfortable sharing, right? In my personal experience, it's at 90% accuracy, right? But this is just my sort of subjective feeling based on things I've tried, based on things that our customers tried. And it really varies. If you typical coding agents sitting at 70% accuracy for general code, for infra, they are much less accurate, I would say, because there is less data that LLMs are trained for. Comparing to human engineer, it really depends, right? Do you compare it to junior developer or senior developer? So from that point of view, it is not, but our goal is to enhance existing developers, make them, if it's a junior developer, educate them on how these changes can be done so they can dig deeper. And for seniors is to remove the manual work that they have to repeatedly do again and again. So this is one of the things, right? So where we go into more details. So we show just the top issues, but here we can see all the typical issues and actual issues that we can see, everything from databases and storage accounts. We connect to a suite of tools in the cloud as well. All the cloud providers, they have their own suite of tools that make sure that companies know what they are exposed to, and we connect those and use them as signals again, and you are then able to remediate it just like I did previously. And so this is how AI DevOps we can give it tasks, right? Just create a new Kubernetes cluster, reorganize your structure, create new S3 bucket, and just like we did, not just for security purposes, but just for DevOps purposes, right? I need new database, I need new systems, and it creates perfectly correct and great code for you to deploy those things. So this is where DevOps agent works on its own and sort of an automatic mode. However, we also can switch the seats where our agent actually works as a reviewer for human engineers. So let's say an engineer creates a pull request where, like here, myself, I created a pull request, and then CloudGini AI agents created a review of these changes, explaining what resources I'm trying to change, what will this involve when it comes to security or other related guidance, right? What are recommendations, specific feedback line by line, and then policy violations. And this is a very cool one because now for the first time, and this is very technical, this is very enterprise, and probably only few people that work with DevOps will really relate to that. But it's basically one of the challenges so far has been in organization with, let's say, tens and hundreds of engineers pushing a lot of changes. How do you ensure that they follow the same standards and coding guidelines and policies that the company might have? And it's very hard to enforce. And so far, it's been basically engineers been checking each other's code. Now with AI agent, we can very quickly check for all the policies that organization might have. Here we have policies that, resources can be created only in European data centers, data sovereignty, for example, or you are, health tech or fintech company in Europe, and you need to ensure the data of your users only in Europe. And you can't allow your engineers by mistake to deploy your services in any other data centers in the world. So, and this policy, you see, it's in natural language. You don't need to create a specific language for it. And then it's completely enforced here in the pull requests and the code that is generated by agent as well. So I think this is pretty much it for the demo.
Thank you so much. So, I mean, speaking of the already existing market, for example, are there some competitors in the market, and what was missing that you are actually tackling with your solution?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because in the end, security space, of course, and cloud security as well, is very crowded space. There is a lot of competitors. One of the biggest known examples are Wiz, Israeli-American company. They've been sold recently to Google for $32 billion. And they created a very comprehensive cloud security platform with a lot of features, with a lot of alerts. They're plus testing a lot of things. But most of these tools, then they've been created pre-AI era with the mindset of engineers doing the job. So it's a lot of focus on finding information and presenting it to engineers, and so that engineers can start working on those and figuring it out. So our advantage being starting in this space after AI has been available is that we can look at it with new eyes and think about, okay, what it would mean if AI agent works alongside human engineers? How would that interface look like? So instead of getting just alerts, thousands of alerts, maybe an AI agent can just create fix for you every day and keep your security checked while you're asleep, and then presenting with you job done, basically, which you just need to approve.
I feel kind of with the AI code generating or kind of taking over some of the tasks, I think the security part is becoming more valuable, and it's more initial because things go wrong, So it's better to have AI to check the AI, at some point.
I think with the amount of data we're dealing with, if you look at the companies, none of them, they have perfect security. Even though they use all these monitors, they basically ignore it because they are swarmed by amount of data and issues that are there. So they have to prioritize very vigorously. Now, maybe you don't have to prioritize as much. Maybe you can just fix it automatically.
Yeah, from my experience working with some cybersecurity or kind of this type of startups was that there's still the debate between on-prem, kind of database or service, but also kind of cloud. So what is your approach, if a customer is having on-prem, not on cloud?
Yeah. So just for the listeners, on-prem would typically mean infrastructure, like I mentioned. It could be your own racks of servers and databases, machines in your basement, let's say, right? This is on-prem, or in your office of your building. And for that reason, it is actually hard to secure it. It is harder, let's say, for a small company to ensure there is a physical security, there is a limited access. No one can come with USB stick, put it in the machines and steal the customer's data. For that reason, if you're talking like a real on-prem where company deals with it themselves, it's very hard to get, those certifications that are typically required if you want to sell to large enterprises, right? ISO 27001, SOC 2 in US. So that's why typically we are talking about cloud. But cloud doesn't provide you security by default. The configurations are actually quite unsecure by default. So it's your job as an engineer, the product owner, to ensure that your configuration is secure. So that's where we focus on helping that. I think on-prem is an interesting use case, and there is more companies are looking into it. But what I see is more sovereign cloud. It's probably it's a larger companies that outside of, let's say, US, like European clouds, they own large data centers and they can provide a more vigorous security. But there you treat them as a cloud, right? And we also work with them.
Yeah. Also, like something like very kind of interesting about this space of kind of security and like compliance space, from my experience, is the go-to-market. How do you sell this to customers? And from my experience, we were struggling because if something hasn't happened, how do you communicate that okay, there might be some security things, or that like your code might not be, it might be actually like vulnerable, and all this type of things. So what is your go-to-market strategy with CloudGini, and how do you guys approach the customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, in the end, I think if we are being practical and completely transparent, as security then is a concern, but it's maybe top 10 concerns for most companies, because most companies just need to survive, need to sell product, need to get customers. This is what's on top of their mind, right? Things just need to work. Products just need to work. That's the baseline, and security comes after that, right? Like, okay, yeah, if we get security breach, that's a huge issue, right? But if we don't, then we don't, right? No one will notice. And this is the sort of mindset we have to deal with, and it definitely creates a tension in a sense, right, with a product, because it's not maybe urgent, except those cases where it directly helps you to sell. And this is what we've been focusing on. If you want to sell to large companies, if you are B2B SaaS, you will be guaranteed, especially if you're in a regulated industry, you will be guaranteed to be asked from your customers, how your security dealt with. Do you have certifications? Can you ensure that our customers' data is safe with you? Because if we use your system, you will store some of this data, and then you will become a vulnerability. And if a company itself, let's say enterprise, is ISO 27001 certified, it automatically requires all the other companies be compliant as well. So with that in mind, we target those companies that have this urgent need to get through those checks, and not enough time or expertise to do it in the cloud infrastructure area. And another case is typically, just proving to customers, right? We doing our best to secure your data. We take it now. Security becomes more of a statement that we are here, we can trust us, we are established, we actually have resources to invest into it. So that's way to differentiate yourself compared to, let's say, scrappy new companies that might have more innovative product, but they haven't solved all these issues, right? So then the more established companies will choose more established product, even though it might be less innovative than small startups.
And do you have defined some clear ICPs of the companies that you're targeting?
Yes, I think our ICP is typically a mid-sized company which experiences quite a bit of growth, that is about to start selling to large enterprise companies and go through these security questionnaires, and even smaller companies that are in regulated industries, in fintech, in health tech. because those companies already from day zero, they face regulatory pressures from the governments and states because there are international sort of rules about how you need to treat your data, how your infrastructure should look like, because they deal with sensitive data, right? With financial data, with payments and health data. So those companies are typically would be best users for our product.
Yeah. But also kind of like something that I was struggling with was, who to target in those companies. Do you target the security, like head of security, head of product, or the CEO? Because this like head of security is super technical, and then he doesn't listen. He doesn't see the business side of things if something goes wrong. And then CEO or kind of like the business person doesn't know the technical part of this. So there was a bit of, kind of who to really approach in the company. So like my question is that how do you tackle this question? Who do you approach and who do you think, being more welcoming to you guys?
Yeah, and in all honesty, we're still figuring this out. And our challenge is that our buyer is not necessarily same as our user. So our end user is a DevOps engineer, right, or full stack engineer that needs help on making sure they can deal with their KPIs, which is, the work in infrastructure, number of deployments, or number of security issues patched in a timely manner, in an effective way. So that's the user, but they're not necessarily buyer. The buyer would be their manager or CTO or security officer, right? Those people that actually care about security in the organization, right? Developer by itself not necessarily will be bothered by it because they don't want to touch it. Actually, they don't want to deal with compliance and security. So it's usually mandate from CTO. Hey, we need to go through this compliance, and our cloud infrastructure needs to be fully secure. Now it's your job to do it. So from that point of view, we target typically the CTOs and platform leads and CISOs, VP of cloud.
Okay. And like they have some like practical tips on how to target these people on which platforms or like what are the ways just to get them in a meeting?
I think this is more question for my co-founder, and she's our go-to-market expert. But in her experience, the most effective for us been LinkedIn outreach, very, very straightforward, right? But we don't use any of the AI SDRs. We do craft each message ourselves, try to tailor-made it, try to understand the company where they might be in their life cycle and their needs. So that brings quite a lot of responses actually, because it seems like a problem that people can relate to. And then we target, let's say, conferences, developer, cloud community groups. And that's where we talk to more users, right? To gain the feedback, trying to understand what they might want to see in the product. Because we do need buy-in from both, right? Yes, CTO will say, yes, we need security, but in the end, it's the engineers that need to use the product. And if they don't want to, if they don't say, okay, I see how it's going to help my work, CTO cannot push them to use the product if they don't see it valuable, right? So especially here in Nordics, because here in Nordics, people are empowered to look for ways to solve the problems themselves. So from that point of view, we are still figuring it out, in other words.
Yeah. But do you feel that you need to educate your customers about the issue, or is it already a common issue that, okay, this is a must tackle problem?
Yeah, I mean, they typically know about the issue, right? But if they don't go through those typical timelines exactly, they're just maybe not very bothered by them, right? They are okay with dealing with the way they deal. There is no urgency, and this is where we're trying to find out what would be the more urgent scenario for most companies, right? But we are starting with compliance, so that's where we're starting. So, for example, DORA, it's a new regulation in European Union for all fintech. It's very matching ISO 27001. Now all fintech companies need to comply, and it became in power basically this year. It's been introduced last year, so now all the companies are scrapping to basically make sure that they can follow it. So this is exactly one of the types of events we are looking at to make sure we can meet companies at the right time where they're thinking about this problem actively.
Yeah. Because I see that like startups which are, like dealing with compliance, like they are waiting, for some EU compliance to be, kind of coming out, and then it's either they're too early or they're too late. But then, or like the lucky ones, they are on time, so they like have money to wait, and then, if the new regulations are out, then they can like capture the customers, which is something, very much influenced by EU direction, where they go.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where we want to not necessarily stay in this space only, right? So we tackling general security space, but like I mentioned, it does require a mind shift to ensure that people understand that before you didn't have time to do it, but now you don't have excuse to not do it in a sense. Right now it is almost too easy in a sense. But it does require certain, like you say, educating customer on this problem.
Yeah. Like you mentioned,
and building trust, I would say, building trust is a big one, right? To make sure that, okay, we actually provide correct solutions to this problem.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what also it takes to sell in this space, is that you build this like relationship. It's not very fast sales kind of cycle. It's more that like you meet, you educate, you kind of follow up, and then it might actually take 1 year or 6 months or a bit more or less. But it's really kind of like building the trust, because they're also but also like you're dealing with security, which they also need to be sure that you understand what you're doing actually. Because if without because if they like use your solution and then things go way better, way more worse, then that's a bigger problem, than like having a little problem.
Yeah.
But then speaking of like Nordics, as you mentioned that you all are based in Norway, I can see. So like, are you focusing in like Nordic companies, or it's actually kind of like which like countries are you looking for?
Yeah, we've been focusing 90% of our efforts in Nordic companies, and the reason for this is very simple. It's where we can gain trust more easily. Companies are very open, and we've been very lucky with early adopters that were becoming paid pilots and early customers, and been very supportive on this journey. So kudos to those innovative thinkers, and I hope we also solved brought them value back. But yeah, it's just easier to build trust when you're on the same ground. And in Nordic societies in general, this is one of the rules of business, right? It's based on trust. It's trust-based. So from that point of view, it's easier for us to go to those companies. We have a customer from US right now with some European roots, so that's also sort of helped. But in general, I think we need to prove on a smaller scale, let's say first, and then we plan to go mass market, because basically there is no limitations, right? And this product can be used from whoever, from wherever.
And like, how long is your sales cycle for now, if you can say on average?
I think with startups, it could be a couple of weeks, right? With larger companies, we still to nail really one, I would say. But we have good conversations, so I suspect it's going to be 3 to 6 months for larger companies, maybe more.
Like we arrived to our like last part of the podcast, so where I asked like a random question, and then I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Maybe like the first question will be about like Nordics. Like, what makes Nordics different than other European countries or region?
Yeah. I think, like I mentioned, it's this sense of trust and equality. People are very autonomous, right? The knowledge workers are very, very educated and productive, I would say, on average. So they are open to trying things that work, very pragmatic. Definitely, there is less hierarchy. You can't just sell it through, top level management. You have to get buy-in from people. So that makes it actually more exciting for me personally, because I would want to build a product that actually is loved by end users, not the one that was pushed by them by their managers. So that makes it great for us. And I think for the security company, it's good to be in Nordics, because Nordics do have a reputation of being both, high-level trust society. There is a very strong regulations. I think Norway, even though Norway is not technically in EU, but it follows more EU regulations than European countries themselves, and there is very strong data privacy laws, just like everywhere else in Europe, I guess. So from that point of view, it's great to build a company from Nordics. And I think another thing is, personally, the founder, I wouldn't lie, say, okay, it wouldn't be better to be out of San Francisco or New York or this kind of startups, right? Where the DevOps and security is also pretty big. One advantage of being here is, as a founder, you are able to go full in on this. You can take more risks in a sense because of all the support systems provided by the governments and by society at large. So that allows us to do that in a sense, right?
And what will be your next market after Nordics?
I think US, right? This is probably, once we validated and made a very strong opening, obviously it's going to be US. This is where most of things happening. But we see some interest already from other European companies. So we'll see. Maybe that could be a next step. But I think definitely we need to prove ourselves in that huge market.
Yeah. What is one piece of advice you got which turned out to be totally wrong?
Interesting. I like nothing really comes to mind like immediately. Like I don't think it's one thing necessarily, but we get tons of advice all the time, and ourselves we also oftentimes wrong. Or we look at others like, they do this, maybe we should also do this, right? So my take on it is always to not to just follow crowd or follow advice, but really try to think about from first principles. Like, okay, well, why this advice? Is it relevant for us? In what context it was created? Because it was maybe relevant for this person or this company in that time. And especially post-AI era, you have to reimagine and rebuild a lot of assumptions on how to build products, how to address customers. So you have to start from scratch in a sense. You still need to listen to good advice in a sense because you can save your time, but you need to filter it out through your context and understand, not just follow blindly, I would say. So I think, 50% of stuff we hear is probably wrong for us.
Okay. And how much time do you spend with your co-founders, kind of brainstorming, kind of talking about different topics with each other?
I mean, it's hard to quantify. We're almost like always on Slack, sharing thoughts, ideas. We meet in Oslo regularly and have those deeper sessions. So it almost becomes like a family in a sense. You speak more to them than your own family.
Do you feel that as a CEO, you have a bit of more responsibilities than other co-founders?
For sure, right? In the end, the final decision falls on me, and if I'm wrong, then we are all wrong, right? But I try to mitigate it by really listening to everyone and trying to understand their perspective and really weighing in their insights into my decisions. But at the end, that's my decision, and and that's why the role of CEO is not just a paper. It does entail certain responsibility into what direction we go for, what kind of culture we set.
Yeah, that's true. And what has been like your personal journey to building startups?
Yeah, I mean, I've been interested in startups since I was very young. I mean, I've been hustling in high school, when I was living in Kyrgyzstan. That's where I'm originally from. It was very early, like internet era where internet was still on DSL, like phone connections, and it was very expensive and very hard to access. So then I would buy internet access for, let's say, big packages, and then I would resell smaller packages to my classmates. That's how my entrepreneur journey started, and pirating some games and selling those and installing, Windows and things like that. But like a real, let's say, startup fever got me when I was working at Microsoft. I tried to do startup weekends. That was like early on in my 20s. Is when I started to understand how this works, but I was very, very, unexperienced, and it was more like just seeing those success stories just motivated me. And then for real, it started when I left Microsoft. I decided to join early stage startups as tech lead, as the CTO, to really understand how it works first. I didn't decide to become founder first because I wanted to learn. And then last 3 years, I've been a co-founder. So before this startup, I co-founded another startup.
Yeah. So if someone wants to have a chill, nice life and just not be bothered with some kind of like big problems of the world, what path do you suggest them? Like go work for someone else or just go make your own company?
Yeah, that's a tricky question, right? I think before it was like, I'll just go get job, right? That's a safe path. But now I think that's also a risky path, right? Like, I don't know if me going back to become, let's say, hired engineer is necessarily safer path that I chose now, even though it's super hard and super challenging and uncertain. With the amount of layoffs, with the amount of automation and replacement that we see in the industry, right? Microsoft just laid off 10% of their, and that was, every year for the past 3 years, they've been laying off, 5 to 10% people, and that did every other company. So from that point of view, I don't think it's safe to have a job, just like it's not safe to become a founder, create something new. So what I would focus on rather is making your skills invaluable, making your insights invaluable, learn something unique, do something. So that's the only way you can find either job or start something new and find your own path.
Yeah, just like have your unique selling point, whatever you do, either building
Exactly.
or else. So my next question is that what is something totally unexpected you have learned about yourself while building a startup?
Yeah, many things. I learned that I'm actually not lazy. I've always felt like when I was working that I was lazier than others because it was like I was very good at what I did. Like as an engineer, I was always praised by my engineers, but I knew that I was like working at maybe 50% of my capacity, and that bothered me, right? And I tried all kind of discipline and hacks to say, hey, how can I make myself more productive? And this startup showed me that, no, I wasn't lazy. I just didn't have anything that I was passionate enough about to spend all my time on. And now it just becomes like I can either play game or I can build my company in the evening at night. And I often choose my company. I still give myself permission to, when I need to take off my mind of things, but now it's actually equally fun and engaging and and I would argue more satisfying absolutely after finishing something else at 10 o'clock in the night than spending a couple of hours playing games. Something similar.
Indeed, like there's this like mindset shift because like once you start building your own business or it's a startup, you actually don't take it more as a job. It's more like a hobby. And then every goal that you hit is like you're just like getting pumped, for the next one. And then you're just like working either on the phone, computer, and all this sort of thing. So like my last question is that what do you do on the weekends?
Yeah, on weekends, it's usually just family. I have a 2-year-old daughter. She's absolutely amazing. I'm very lucky to have her. Spending time with my wife and immediate family. So doing chores and trying to get some rest, but oftentimes at least half a day spent also on catching up on work. Because I'm a techie, but I'm a CEO, so a lot of time spent customer conversations and investor conversations. So that's when I have actually free time to do some coding as well.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Davlet. It was very nice having you in my pod.
Yeah, pleasure chatting with you. It was great. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.